Well, hi there, this is Kermit the Frog.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please, and here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, Batarians, chickens, and things, to episode 78 of the MuppeTrek podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. We're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. And Jarman, what are those?
Those are the Muppets and Star Trek, and we do one-to-one reviews of the Muppet Show and Star Trek, the original series.
And this week we have a doozy with special Muppet Show guest Victor Borge and Star Trek, the original series episode, The Savage Curtain.
I still have no idea why it's called that. So now you have to tell us, Steve, who is this Victor Borge, which we know how to say now, which is great.
We do. He was born, actually, Borge Rosenbaum.
Oh, jeez.
And he is from Denmark. He's Danish. He was called the Clown Prince of Denmark. He played his first major concert at 17 and began his stand-up career just a few years later, becoming known for actually telling anti-Nazi jokes.
Wow.
Well, as it turns out, Germany invaded Denmark, and luckily, he was performing a concert in Sweden at the time, made his way to Finland, and then caught the last neutral U.S. ship heading to the U.S.
Wow.
And he actually, during the war, snuck back, disguised as a foreign sailor, to visit his dying mother, his sick mother.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's crazy. Snuck in to Nazi territory.
Wow.
Nuts. In 1953, he started a one-man show on Broadway called Comedy in Music. It ran for more than 800 performances and is still the longest-running one-person show in Broadway history.
That's amazing.
Even at age 90, he performed 60 concerts in his last year, and he died in 2000. What does our audience know him from? Well, he's kind of a staple of some American comedy and variety shows. He was on a lot of PBS specials. That's how I remember Victor Borge. And while he did have a few small roles, his biggest came in 1982 when he did a cameo in King of Comedy, starring Robert De Niro. But he doesn't have many major film credits to point out otherwise.
King of Comedy is a good movie, by the way, folks. Him and Jerry Lewis. It's interesting.
What the hell is he up to this week? Backstage, someone's looking for Bobby Benson, and various people end up attempting to watch the babies, and the babies eventually kind of drive them all insane.
I'd forgotten, why do I hate that name, Bobby Benson? Oh, yeah, the damn babies.
It turns out the person searching for him is a police officer, and Bobby Benson is under arrest for, it's explained as losing a lawsuit to the Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
And owing a debt.
Very strange.
He's back just in time for the closing number. On stage, the Swedish chef is appalled to learn that Victor Borge is Danish and not Swedish. Kermit introduces the opening number, and a bunch of macho pigs in leather daddy outfits sing Macho Man on the rooftop.
Really had me going.
That's right. And Link Hogthrob leads them, and then Gonzo and some chickens come and battle it out with afros. It's great. Kermit introduces Victor Borge, who performs a duet with Rolf. They tell some jokes before deciding on Hungarian Rhapsody number 2, which they sort of have to play over top of each other. And they move about feverishly, and as they finish the piece, he slams the lid of the piano. The Rats then hit the stage, performing Rock Around the Clock, interluded with them hiding from a cat. And it's really weird because these are sort of proto-rat puppets for what we would eventually see in things like Muppet Take Manhattan.
Yeah, and it made me think, I'm like, oh yeah, Rizzo hasn't shown up yet in existence yet.
Right. And so it was just one of those things where I was like, wow. Well, I think this is the first season, or maybe end of third, is when Steve Whitmire finally joined the cast. So at this point, Steve was still apprenticing. And so it's not until late this season, and in season 5, we're going to see a lot more.
And this season, episode 18 is where Rizzo first appears.
Yep. So we're coming up. But at this point, he was sort of still apprentice. He was playing a lot of right hands.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, more of that later. We then get Gonzo on stage singing a duet with himself in the mirror of the song Act Naturally. Afterwards, we get a trip to the Swedish chef's kitchen where he tries to make turtle soup. The turtle fights back, retreating into his shell and then pulling out 2 barrels of guns or cannons. The Swedish chef begs for his life before being shot at in a workplace gun violence incident.
Yes.
Some of this stuff does not age well.
No, it doesn't.
Victor Borge is then accompanied by Bobby Benson's baby band as they perform Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto. Victor falls off his stool, which I had to rewatch. It was so good. And it's surprisingly tame. Kermit thanks Victor Borge. The babies give Victor a baton. Victor has contracted chicken pox from the babies, which at his age can be very dangerous. And that is what we call the Muppet Show.
There's gunshots. There's chicken pox going around.
Man,
it's dangerous.
And I didn't even mention, I kind of glossed over it. The backstage plot is a lot of like borderline child abuse. And I'm really confused what Bobby Benson was under arrest for.
Yeah, Miss Piggy was watching the babies and she wasn't doing a very good job. And
because if the tooth fairy thing is to be taken anyway seriously, then he collects teeth from the babies.
That's even more disturbing.
Dude, how fucked is that? What if all those babies are just like little stunted 7-year-olds?
You notice they have no teeth, but really large hands. So
right. Oh my God. I hate Bobby Benson now too.
There, exactly. He's terrible.
I'll take Jerry and the Atrix any day. Over Bobby Benson. Star, what'd you think of this episode with Victor Borge?
I thought Victor Borge was very charming. He was very silly and a lot of slapstick and physical humor that he was still good at the advanced age he appeared to be, even in this episode. He's very silly and he fit in really well with the Muppets. And he also happens to be a great piano player. So that was also like an added benefit to him being silly, funny, and having a skill that he can also showcase. I thought they almost had something with that scene with him and Ralph, but like it just felt like they needed more rehearsal or something, because there's a lot of parts where it's like Ralph wasn't hitting as accurately as normal, because I feel like maybe he couldn't actually touch the keys because Victor was actually going to be playing. I
wondered about that, because if you watch, you can see him hitting some keys.
Yeah, it's weird. But
now,
then
mind you, what they may have done is just known that since the parts are divvied up and they're not playing at the same time, that they could just cut the sound there.
That's true.
And put in the real thing. And so there's a chance that Ralph was hitting keys at the time.
And they just had to do a lot of editing or something.
Right. It just didn't work.
Because you could tell, like, yeah, when Victor was playing, he was actually hitting those keys and hitting the right ones at the right time. So
I found myself wondering, I was like, do they have half of the piano disabled? And is that why Rolf is playing down there and Victor's playing at the top? But then at the end, they like moved all over and I went, well, that's out.
Yeah, it was very confusing. So I don't know what was going on there, but it just seemed like it was also like parts of it were not timed correctly. It was a little rough, but it was really cute though. And it still was really fun to watch. And it was like a great idea. Just like maybe need some more rehearsal or something. But
yeah.
I have to say though, what really knocks this episode for me is the damn babies. They're terrifying and I hate them.
That's right. They are. There's a lot of them. Like, I know I glossed over the backstage plot, but this is one of the heavier backstage plots we've seen.
What do you mean heavier?
Like, there's more time spent backstage
that's
this
true.
episode than a lot. Because we get like Bobby Benson and him rehearsing, and then the thing with Fozzie, and then we get check-ins, Bobby Benson again, and then Piggy taking the babies, and then Scooter going up to the dressing room, and the scene with the babies up there. And then her returning the babies, Bobby Benson coming back. Like, that's a ton backstage. That's more than we get most of the time.
That's true. And then as a consequence, I also feel like they could have done more with Victor Borge, putting him in different environments. Because basically he was just in a suit playing piano in every one of his like scenes. Whereas like they had like Elton John on, and I think at one point he was playing in a swamp. Like he's still playing piano, but he would be in different places with crazy costumes. Right. Where Victor was just like in his same suit the whole time, playing on the same piano the whole time. Like, so they could have done more with that, I feel like.
So I agree with some part of that, in that I wish there was more Victor Borge.
Yeah.
He was only in like the 2 big numbers and then his one little interlude thing that was really quick. He's such a great performer. He got along great with the Muppets. He interacted well with the Muppets, which I really, we always appreciate on this show.
Great physical comedy.
But you're right. We didn't get a lot of our usual sketches or like those anchor sketches. Though I will say Macho Man was great and high energy. I loved Act Naturally with Gonzo.
Oh, I have to comment on that because I don't always watch this with my fiance, but she was watching it with me this time, and she said, "Oh my God." And I said, "What's wrong?" And she goes, No, this song that Gonzo's singing, it's a Ringo Starr song off of the White Album, I think she said. And her dad sang it together for her first grade talent show. So when there's a video for out there, I'm going to see eventually, but it's her singing. She says, "I sing terribly, but my dad sings with me and plays guitar. And we sing this song together for my first grade talent show." And I was like, "That's awesome." So she recorded it while we were watching and sent it to her dad because he was like, what a coincidence. But it was a really cute number, though. I like that a lot.
Okay.
He puts on different hats and stuff.
Nice. I'm glad I had a deep connection. Yeah. I love that number.
Exactly.
All right. So, music this week. We got Macho Man, made famous by the Village People and released in 1978. This was a relatively contemporary number at the time this episode came out. And the Village People are named after Greenwich Village, which I guess I'd never actually put together anymore, which at the time was sort of the the gay capital of the world.
Right.
Greenwich Village. Hungarian Rhapsody number 2. This is one of a series of 19 rhapsodies from Franz Liszt. He died after contracting pneumonia at a music festival dedicated to Wagner.
Weird.
Yeah, he died from something he got caught at a music festival. That's fucking rock and roll. Rock Around the Clock. The most famous version was recorded by Bill Haley and his Comets in 1954. This was the first rock and roll record to hit number 1 on the U.S. charts.
Wow.
Act Naturally. While upbeat, the song is about someone who just got their heart broken, and they're so sad that someone sees them and is like, "We should put you in a sad movie because you'd play the part perfectly."
Oh.
The lyrics, if you listen, are actually very sad, despite it being a very upbeat song. Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven's Piano Concerto number 14. The whole piece, it's inscribed on his notes for it. Over the top was, "This whole piece ought to be played with the utmost delicacy and without dampers." And what he was indicating is he wanted the sustain pedal used through the entire piece.
Oh, God. That sounds like a mess, wouldn't it?
Well, it turns out old pianos kind of sucked at resonating notes for a long time. So if you follow the directions on a modern piano, it's a mess.
All the notes will stay on the whole time.
But they say that if you can find like an old antique piano, that they suck at sustain, and so it makes sense.
Interesting.
Piano Concerto number 1 by Tchaikovsky. From 2021 to 2022, it served as the official anthem of the Russian Olympic Committee. It had to be substituted for the actual national anthem because of the doping scandal, and they weren't allowed to use any of their own national symbols. So Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto became their song.
That's funny.
Jeremy, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
I almost went with the Macho Man one because there's
a lot going on.
A lot going on, but I just don't like that song, so it kind of ruined it for me. But I also, the Rats made me really excited, so I went for the Rock Around the Clock with the Rats because there was a lot going on as well, but also it's like, Rizzo's like my favorite character from the movies, so it was like it gave me that feeling of excitement, and also just there was difficult Muppeteering going on as well, so that was my favorite.
I'm going to give it to Gonzo and Act Naturally. I really respect when a single Muppet or performer can just own the whole stage.
Oh, yeah.
I like that. And it's often I'm finding Dave Goelz who can really capture that. And I think does the best solo performances, sort of.
The voice of Gonzo.
Yeah, the voice of Gonzo, Dave Goelz.
And they had 2 puppets, obviously, at the same time. So that was impressive.
In some ports, they did. Some points it was green or like a split screen thing.
Right.
Because then they edited in other like hats and stuff. So I think it switched and used some clever TV tricks throughout.
Yeah. So maybe they filmed it twice with the split screen or something.
Right.
That makes sense.
Because some of the movements were really exact. And if it was just another puppet on the other side for all of it, I would be blown away.
That'd be very impressive.
Really, really precise. All right. So, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek, the original series?
This week, it's the Savage Curtain for some reason. So
they didn't say it in the episode, so I don't understand.
Because they often do, but they didn't this time.
They often do.
So the Enterprise is sent to investigate the volcanic planet Excalibur, which sounds really cool, but it's not. It's just a bunch of rocks. Even though it should be impossible, the sensors in the ship detect life forms below. And they're about to leave and just go back to the Federation, to their next task, when suddenly an image of Abraham Lincoln comes on their screen, and the red alert goes off. And he claims he's the real deal. He's really Abraham Lincoln, not an illusion. And they say, okay, and he can come on board so they can test him, and maybe he can see their ship, too, because he's really interested in seeing their ship. And once on the ship, they pretend that he really is Lincoln, just to placate what they see as this strange alien pretending or thinks that he actually is Lincoln. So they want to be safe, and they put on their best duds, and they do like a presidential greeting for him and everything. And the scans show that he is human, and suddenly a huge swath of safe for humans land shows up on the planet below that wasn't there before, with our environment safety and all that kind of stuff there so they could beam down if they wanted to. And Lincoln says he doesn't know how he knows this, but he knows that they should go down to the planet for some reason. So Spock concludes, once Lincoln's out of the room, that the alien race below somewhere must have manifested Lincoln in particular, because they must have found from their scans that he is greatly admired by Kirk, and they picked him on purpose to get into his emotions. But against the outcry from Bones and Scotty, Kirk and Spock go down to the planet with Lincoln. And once on the planet, they're greeted by Surak, an ancient figure from Vulcan, who is the person who supposedly brought Vulcans into enlightenment in their current state of logic, and he's like a huge figure in Vulcan history. And then this really weird-looking rock monster, looks like something out of Lost in Space or Doctor Who, shows up with smoke coming out of his eyes and stuff, and he tells them that they will have to face off with 4 evil beings and fight to the death, because the rock people don't understand their concepts of good and evil, and they want this to be demonstrated for them so they can learn from it and figure out which one's better. And then they are introduced to who they'll be fighting, and it's Genghis Khan, Kahless the Klingon, who's like an old mythological Klingon figure, and this unethical scientist woman from Tiburon called Zora, and a World War III Earth warlord who committed genocide, Colonel Philip Green, all picked out of time and place to fight them here. And Kirk tells the rock monster, I'm not going to fight these people. This is ridiculous. We're peaceful. We come in peace. But the monster says they fight or they will die. So then Colonel Green walks over, the genocidal colonel from the past, and tries to talk with Kirk and say they should work together because this guy's our common enemy. We don't need to fight each other. And they almost agree, but then it was just a trap to fight them. And so everyone starts jumping into fight, and they fend them off eventually. So Kirk again says that he will not fight. So the rock monster says, oh, you need some motivation. So he says now they can talk to the ship. And when they talk to the ship, Scotty says that it's being slowly crushed, slowly destroyed by some unknown power. Systems are shutting down. They only have a limited amount of time before they'll be destroyed. So now they have a motivation to really start fighting. So the rock monster is not bluffing. So also the Enterprise crew, because of the rock monster, are able to watch what's happening from their view screen. So they're watching all this go down just as we are. So back in the planet, Surak is a pacifist. So he convinces them to let him go try to negotiate with the villains. But once he gets over there, they kill him and they impersonate his voice so that Spock and Kirk and Lincoln will want to go rescue him. And they try this scheme to distract them, and Lincoln's going to go save him. But Lincoln finds him there dead, and then they kill Lincoln. So in an anticlimactic ending, they just beat up the bad guys. The bad guys run away. And then the rock monster's like, well, I guess you win, even though they ran away. The rock monster lets them go back to their ship and leave. They yell at the rock monster first, saying, this is bad, you shouldn't do this kind of thing. But he turns back into a rock and doesn't give a shit. And it doesn't seem like the monster learned anything from this. They don't seem to warn anyone else from going to this planet in the future, unless I missed that part. And that's the end of the episode. So, Steven, what do you think of this episode?
Okay, some things I liked. I, in general, did like this episode. I agree that it lost its way so heavily in the last 5 minutes.
I did enjoy it too. So I'll get into that later, though. Yeah, I agree.
Here's my question. This whole season, we have been in low budget hell. Mm-hmm. And the last 2 episodes, it feels like, is where all the budget went.
So I did read about that, and it's not actually in my trivia, so I'll bring it up now that you say that. They reuse so much stuff in this episode that they found on the studio lot they didn't have to pay for. So that's the way they were able to finagle it, and they had to return a lot of it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's how they made that happen.
It just felt high production between the monster, the setting, all the different actors. Like, you don't get that many actors a lot of the time. It just felt like a big episode.
So the setting was actually from Lost in Space that had just wrapped.
Nice.
They used a set that was already in existence. They didn't let the 2 actors talk Genghis Khan and Zora, because then they could pay them a lot less. So that's why they had no lines.
That makes sense.
But anyways, yeah. So you had a good point though.
I love that it was such a crazy concept, but like, who cares? Like, really carried it off. Like Abe Lincoln in space. Like that's a fever dream someone had. Really, that was at a Star Trek episode. And I like that we got like Star Trek universe history drops, like the World War III general.
Yeah.
And stuff, because I was just watching a recap video. I was like, what you need to know for Picard? I was watching it and they showed him. And I was like, I haven't seen that guy yet. He must be coming. And then here we are like 2 days later and he's in that episode. So I liked that we got a little bit of like Earth background.
Yeah.
Things I struggled with a little bit. I wish there had been more good guy superheroes. It felt stupid. Like, is the indication that both Kirk and Spock would go on to become as big of figures as Lincoln and Surak?
Yeah.
That's hard for me. That being said, I guess Picard has saved the entire galaxy or universe.
Yeah, they all have
3 or 4 times.
And Spock goes on to like help
be an
fix
ambassador
timelines and universes
time
and stuff.
Traveler, and so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's exactly what we were supposed to get from this episode.
Spock brings together all of the Vulcans and Romulans eventually. So,
So maybe that's exactly what they were going after.
Maybe
I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't understand the implications.
Maybe.
The Rock Monster, for being highly advanced and clearly civilized enough, but it wanted to learn whether to be good or evil from watching things fight, which is weird.
That was weird.
It was odd. The fight scenes with the rocks and spears were terrible. Like, no one was throwing anything with enough force to look even remotely convincing.
Oh, and they also mentioned that the reason they beam down to the planet, and for some reason their phasers fall off on the ship.
I did love that.
And they did that because it would cost too much money to do the special effects for the phasers for this episode.
I noticed that within the writing, it felt so weird. He's like, yes, welcome to the planet. You must fight. You can use any weapon you can think of that you could make out of rocks or sticks.
Just rocks or sticks.
I was like, oh, okay. All right. Wasn't the one where the same concept, the Gorn? Was that it? He had
to fight that thing for similar reasons.
Yeah, for very similar reasons. And I wish the ending, and let's just talk about the ending, because it was unsatisfying and I can identify exactly why.
Yeah.
Lincoln's plan should have worked.
Mm-hmm.
But the bad guys should have gotten lucky. Because instead, Lincoln walked into a trap that he was trying to also set a trap for them and went out like a punk. And that felt bad because the audience liked Lincoln. I liked Lincoln.
Yeah.
And so for him to go in, risk his life, and then just have the bad guys just outsmart him felt so shitty.
Because they weren't playing with those bad guys as being very smart. So.
No.
Yeah. And I don't like the fact that it just kind of ends with the ideas beat people up. There was no like bigger message at the end there. It's like, well, we ended up having to beat them up anyways. That's the thing we said we weren't going to do, but I guess we just got to beat them up. It's like, you couldn't think of anything else.
And I think, and here's the worst part, I think they could have fixed it real easy. Real easy. Kill Surak, fine. He went over and he got taken advantage of the bad guys. Have Lincoln be pulled out as a hostage or something. There's a final fight where Abe Lincoln breaks free and each one of them is fighting bad supervillains. And then have both the captain guy, Captain Green, is that his name?
Colonel Green, yeah.
Colonel Green and Abe Lincoln both get like mortally wounded. And then the bad guys leave Green behind as he calls for help while Kirk and Spock go and hold Lincoln while he dies. And that's what the Rock Monster sees.
Or they save Colonel Green. They patch him up, make sure he doesn't die.
Right. Whatever. That would have been an easy fix with no budget implications. That would have made this such a more satisfying story.
It's where someone learns something. Someone has an arc. Someone changes, but nothing,
right.
No one changed. Like,
Right. So I agree. This was a great episode. And I feel like once they were like going to spring the trap on the bad guys, quote unquote, it just got real bad.
Yeah, from there kind of spiraled down, and they didn't really have a good button on the ending. But yeah, I would say I really enjoyed this episode because of some of the silliness of the concept, and it kind of reminds me of that episode we watched, I think back in season 1, where they go to that planet that has like the Easter Bunny and stuff on it. Remember that?
Oh yeah, like the delusion planet. Yeah.
It reminded me of that. It was like, well, now we got the illusion of Abe Lincoln. It's just so strange that it's just part of the charm of this episode. I didn't forget this episode at all because it just stands out as being so strange. And also cool because you're introduced to these characters that mean a lot for future of Star Trek lore, like Kahless, and then Colonel Philip Green comes back in different series. But yeah, it's just I thought it's upper middle for this season for me because it's silly and fun and different, you know.
I'm gonna say, and this is tough, I'm gonna say that collectively this is the best pair week of episodes we have ever had.
Oh.
I thought Victor Borge's episode was extremely strong for Muppet Show. And I thought this was an extremely strong showing for Star Trek. And I think because of that, this is like the strongest joint showing.
In a while, anyways.
Yeah, maybe since season 2 or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say
Maybe
it's a strong
1.
Showing for season 3 of Star Trek. But I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. At least it might get onto our top 5 just because of that for this season.
That's true. Though there are a couple other really good ones this season that I enjoyed. So
that's true.
This season has the highest competition, kind of.
And we still have the last 2. So
yeah. Yeah, we're so close to the end.
I know. And we'll tell you, audience, what happens after that. Just you wait.
That's right. Just you wait.
So, trivia for this episode. This is the final episode of the series to feature the entire ensemble cast.
Wow. Okay.
After this, some people are missing, that kind of thing. But everyone appears in this one. You know, Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov, everybody. This marks the second time in the original series where they are finding a silicon-based life form. The first being Devil in the Dark with the pain, that episode in the mines. I mentioned this. This is the episode that we see the founding father Kahless of Klingons and Vulcan founding father Surak, and they come back in Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. They're mentioned. Enterprise is especially with Surak's history. It comes to play. And Colonel Philip Green gets mentioned, but then the only one who gets short shrift is that Zora of Tiburon. But also what's cool is Tiburon, where she's from, it's just a quick mention, is where Dr. Severin, the villain from The Way to Eden, was from. Yeah, so it's a little throwback, but yeah, they're from the same planet. Lincoln
Did he have weird eyebrows too?
He did have little, not as much as hers, but it was like he had strange ears or something, like hairy ears or something. It was weird.
Oh man, we gotta look it up now.
But Lincoln tells Kirk there is no honorable way to kill, no gentle way to destroy. There is nothing good in war except its ending. And this speech was
that speech was man.
Yeah, and this speech was written by Star Trek screenwriters, but it's become so popular that some people mistakenly believe something real Abraham Lincoln said, but he never said that in real life.
I thought, and I'll say this, I think the guy who played Lincoln might be the strongest guest actor we have had this season, at least. Maybe
I'd say this season, but my favorite guest actor of all time is the oh god, what the hell is his name? Where I think he might be a Q, but Q doesn't really exist yet in canon.
God damn it! I can see him in my head. Trelawney? No, that's not
Trelane.
Right.
Yes,
Trelane.
He's my favorite guest actor of all of Star Trek.
Baby Q. He was good.
Yeah, he's just so silly and fun and mischievous.
And the guy from like the Shakespeare episode was real good.
Yeah, he was really good. That's true. So one of the coolest bits of material or trivia here is Colonel Green's uniform was recycled into the spacesuit worn by Mork in his appearances on Happy Days and Mork and Mindy.
Whoa.
Like that exact uniform, like the actual costume was then repurposed.
Right, and they just fringed it with silver and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like only 5 years later for Happy Days. And then about almost maybe 9 years later for Mork and Mindy.
That's crazy.
William Shatner struggled to keep weight off during the show's run, famously. and found pounds piling on as filming dragged on over the course of this season, and his weight gain is particularly noticeable in this story in comparison to episodes earlier in season 3. I didn't even notice it until the very end. They had a side profile shot of him. I'm like, oh yeah, he's gotten a little heavier. That's cool. But he always had the girdle on to keep it, kind of pushed upward. But poor Captain Kirk. It's a lot to handle, man. To stay in that tight suit and look good in it, that's hard.
When you're drinking scotch and smoking all day.
He's still alive somehow. And healthy as a horse. I don't know how he does it. All right, so what are our Trek connections, Muppet connections this week?
Money.
Yeah, money does it.
Victor's last name is Borg, and the Borg are a dangerous enemy in the Star Trek universe.
Somebody had a hard time with connections this time around.
I've got 2 real ones.
Okay, that's true, though.
On Deep Space Nine, Odo was compared to Borga in the episode Nanook of the North after impressing everyone on the holodeck with his piano skills.
Rene Auberjonois. Good actor.
And the funniest joke I ever heard was a 1984 2-part TV special featuring countless comedians and actors telling jokes. On the special was Kermit and Piggy. Also on there was Victor Borge and William Shatner, as well as other Muppet friends and guests, including George Burns, Dom DeLuise, and Roger Miller.
Well, look at that.
Yeah, I told you I had 2 real ones.
Those are good ones.
Well, good, because these are basically the same episode, right?
These such the same. Why'd we watch both? I don't understand. They're the same thing.
I don't understand. Both feature opposing factions duking it out. Link Hogthrob and the Macho Pigs against Gonzo and the Chickens, and then Kirk and the Good Guys against the supervillain team.
I had that exact similarity as my first one. For my second one, both have people trying to incite peace, which ends in disaster. Surak with the evil guys, he tries to get peace and then they kill him. And Fozzie with the babies, he tries to tell them a joke and they almost kill him.
That's right. They jump him. In a similar vein, both feature attackers being lured into a false sense of security. The Swedish chef going after the turtle and then getting shot in a workplace gun violence incident. And Kirk and the gang, where they walked into a trap like chumps.
That's so true. Oh, God, what's that noise?
Oh, Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
No. This is the part of the show where we take one character from one episode and transport them over to the other episode. So what you got for us, Steve?
Muppets Trek this week. I've got Bring the Babies Over and Replace the Baddies. Tormenting the good men on the planet. And this would later become the inspiration for Leonard Nimoy on 3 Men and a Baby.
See, I have the opposite. I have the 4 evil people transporting over to the Muppets and replacing the babies. And they are the same personality-wise as they were in Star Trek, but they're all dressed like babies.
Okay. I'm going to have the rock monster come over and replace the cat and rock around the clock. There's a rock and then he transforms and they all have to disappear. And he goes back to being a rock and all the rats come out and dance again.
I know you rats are here somewhere. I will find you.
I will judge all of your beings based on this musical number.
I have Victor Borge replacing the rock monster. He just materializes from the rock with a piano. And he charmingly
there has to be a full grand piano.
Oh yeah, full grand piano, and charmingly and delightfully tells Spock and Kirk what the test he has set up for them is, and he's very likable while doing so, falling off his piano bench a couple times. And
yeah, but couldn't you also see Trelane doing that?
Oh, wonderfully,
showing up all Liberace looking piano.
He was definitely a Liberace lookalike.
He was.
So that brings us to the end of episode 78 of the Muppet Trek podcast.
Join us next time for The Muppet Show with special guest Linda Lavin.
And original series episode, All Our Yesterdays.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Muppet Trek podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.